All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started today. Wrong one. So I want to kind of celebrate the fact that you have your portfolio done. If you want like any type of vindictive feelings towards us, you can realize we now have to grade all of those, so you can let that out. So I want to touch base with you about like what's going on for the rest of the semester, because we've got the portfolio done, and now it's the time where you can. Those who are super into programming might get a little more into some of the programming lectures I'm giving. We're all going to do still some coding, and I want to talk to you about what we're going to do. So I know we talked about jQuery last week, but I also know that the portfolio was due and other homework was due, so there's a chance that people are only listening in this part of the brain. So today we're going to do some more jQuery review with the homework directly in mind. So as far as homeworks go, actually, let's start there. Actually, no. So this week is week 11. We're going to do some Java query and some jQuery catch-up. So I highly recommend you download this file right here. It was a little late. I've got a Q instead of a J. But this file, JS discussion_qquery.html, we're going to be playing with that today. I will also be referencing the slides. There's one part where we click off to do something hands-on, but we'll just do it together. Okay? So that's for this week. Next week, there were some readings this week. I know nobody did them. I checked. Like I can see. But it's about accessible JS, but I'll talk about why I had those down for this week. Next week, we're going to be doing APIs, and in particular, we're going to be talking about something called the weather API. So if you've done 506, you've learned a little bit about JSON, this idea that you can make a request and you'll get some information back. Right? So in this class, to tip our hat at 506 or 507 or whatever people have been doing all that, your next homework assignment, your final homework, not your next homework assignment, but your final homework assignment is going to be to use this Open Weather API. And once again, I'll give you starter code. I haven't made the video yet, that's why I haven't posted it. But I'm going to give you some starter code that looks like this. And it doesn't do anything. All right? And your job is going to be to turn it into this. So it starts off and it hides some of the code along the bottom. And if all I do is click on Get Weather, it will return by default the weather in Ann Arbor in Fahrenheit. And it'll tell us the high and the low, and it'll show a little picture. So the picture, the current temperature, the high, and the low are all provided by the Open Weather API. You'll make a call, and then you'll say, oh, okay, I need to update something, right? If that's the default, I can also put in something like Paris in Celsius and get the weather. I could do maybe someplace somewhere is warm and sunny. No place on this earth is warm and sunny right now. We'll do that. All right, actually, how about Miami Beach? Those jerks. Oh, yeah. All right, so every place is cold. So that will be your final programming assignment. So since I haven't talked about APIs yet, I went back and noticed, oh, back in August when I had to create the syllabus and everything, remember August? I had a quiz opening today on APIs. I moved it back a week. You'll still get the same number of chances. I just didn't want people wasting an effort before we did it. And I can tell you right now, in case you want, it'll be about using more than likely the NASA API, which we'll talk about next week. So that is next week. This week is jQuery review. Then next week is APIs. And then the final 2 weeks, I let you work on your group work. Okay? So I will have this posted probably by the end of tomorrow. I'll make my usual little video and give you the before code and the rubric and everything like that. Okay? Questions on that? So things that are coming up. assignment-wise, at least homework, big homework assignment-wise, the jQuery homework of doing those 5 challenges is due 2 weeks from today. All right? I know homework is normally due on Sunday. It was due the Sunday before that, and I moved it back so that way anybody who was actually here the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, we can give you extra help asking that. Okay? And then the API homework will be due December 8th. Okay, so I don't really know if that's one. I guess that must be 2 weeks if I do the math, because otherwise, a little more than 2 weeks after. Okay? But that'll be it in this class. So that's why I want to do a little more jQuery today. Okay? So let me show you what we're going to be working on. The file I gave you, the JS discussion Q query, if you open it, should look familiar. Does this look familiar to everybody? All right, this is what we did in JavaScript a few weeks ago. All right, we're going to redo it together in jQuery. Okay? And I have maybe 6 slides, and these, I'm not sure it's that many. The slides all have to do with this or with the homework. Trying to give you a really good reference for it. Okay? Because 539 is different than 339 in that in 339, none of the students had ever seen JavaScript or jQuery before. It was new to all of them. And I know in 539, sometimes we have students who are more experienced in some of the in the coding. And so oftentimes students feel like they don't know how to, they're newer, they don't know how to do anything. My goal today is to show you there's a chance that this summer or at some point in the job they're going to ask you to do something. And I want to kind of walk you through how to do it. As I was explaining, oftentimes you go on an interview and they ask you something like, what's one of the hardest things you've ever had to do? I would like to be that person for you. I would like to be the person when they say, our instructor gave us a group project at the end of the semester and didn't give us a rubric. Like, I had to just figure out what I was going to do. And my hope is that your carry-on explanation of that will be like, oh, so I decided I was going to factor in on this one thing, really explore it. Not that I was just going to complain for 2 weeks and keep asking. Right? You'll probably do both, but the idea is to give you something to talk about that's unique to you. Okay? So I will do the slides off of here, and we'll kind of go back and forth. Before I start with the slides, I did want to mention the danger of learning how to do things in JavaScript and jQuery and Node.js. As you will find, with almost anything programming related, people like to think they're better than other people. All right, so there are people who are like, it's all about the HTML and the CSS and having these really good ground knowledge. And then there's going to be other people who are like, you do not need to learn any of that. You can go to a boot camp and you can learn Node.js and you're fine. As a Midwesterner, 5th child of 7, I agree with everyone. Right? That's what I do. But what I want to warn people about is as you start to get these new tools, it's easy to get away from all the accessibility stuff we've been talking about. Like, oh, I can use JavaScript for that, or I can use jQuery for that. So if you didn't get a chance, I just, in the readings, had a link to 2 things. One was an accessible carousel, and the other one was an accessible menu. Right? Because both of these things are highly interactive, especially if you think of a menu where it's got like the drop downs. You have to hover over something and then it drops down. And these are the kind of things that accessibility checkers can't check for. Right? You can't, or it's very difficult. They have to simulate it and go through everything like that. So what I wanted to mention is if people decide to, say, do a carousel, I would like you to be able to have this conversation about what makes a carousel accessible or not accessible. And surprise, surprise, one of the things I use later today is not accessible. And I expect someone to be like, is this what you were talking about? Like, yeah. Okay? So for instance, I hate carousels where they automatically go. My son's school uses a carousel to explain how to dual enroll in multiple high schools at the same time. And you can't control how the speed or how fast it goes. I was only interested in one slide, but it was a very big slide with lots of text in it. So I kept trying to take a screenshot every time it went by, right? Things like that. As you know, keyboard functionality, being able to stop, being able to go through those pictures with that. You have to think about things. Oh, if the image changes, is the screen reader going to read that out somehow? Right? There's a new image there. And then also the focus. So I'm going to put this on both. So why would we care about things like that? Well, oops, wrong one. Again, lots of times people think, oh, this isn't for me. Color contrast isn't for me. Until you try to read something outside on your laptop, right? Well, keyboard navigation not only is important for like keyboard navigation, but more and more of tech is going through voice control as well. So if you're using semantic tags, you're going to be able to take advantage of that. People are distracted by movement. And that's me and example we'll have today. And also just people who need more time to read. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're slow readers. It could be they're trying to read something while their kids are trying to get their attention. Or while they're trying to pretend they're listening in class, right? Like that whole reading you're doing while looking up at the instructor at the same time. I know, because you're looking too directly at them, right? Like no one makes that much eye contact. Okay? So if you go back, if you're interested in things like that, I've got some links for just some accessible content. Thing is, it's scary, all right? Because they get really deep into it. So here's the carousel they made. As you can see, you can click this way. You can also click on numbers. But if you actually look at the code, as I mentioned, it's terrifying. They've got a lot of listeners for blur and focus in. They went all out. I would not expect you to go in and look at this code and be like, yeah, I got that. But what they do have is, if you go through Carousel concepts, they talk a lot about, all right, how do we make it important? But, oops, next slide. But this idea of structure. Hey, that last bit of code may have been intimidating. What's going to happen when I make this bigger? But I think you're good with sections and H3 and a list of unordered list with 3 items. This aria labeled by. What have we seen that's really, really similar to aria labeled by? Aria label, right? So it's a slight distinction between them, but it can find something called carousel heading right there. Here we actually put aria label. If I put aria label, that's what it reads out as the label. Aria labeled by says, go find this thing. Oh, here it is right here. And then read whatever's in the H3. You see that very slight difference. Aria label is, I am the label. Aria labeled by is, hey, I don't know what they want to call it. Right? But whoever's doing the headings does. Okay? So they do walk you through kind of step by step how to build this kind of carousel. But I can't even imagine the reaction if that was the first thing I showed you all. So, okay, the jQuery and the JavaScript. If you came in just a little bit late, we're redoing one of the homeworks from earlier. So everyone go ahead and open it up right now. That's what we're going to be doing. Today's one of our GSI instructor get our steps in days. And we're going to redo the earlier exercise. Okay? So I'm going to put it on 1. So it should say, well, it still says JavaScript discussion, because I didn't change it from earlier. But in this week's module, we're week 11 already. Okay? So before we get started, one of the things that it's important for me to feel like you're leaving here with the ability to do is figure out these small little problems. So there's always good to have a go-to kind of place where you like to go for help. Just remember, I forgot mine. I'll look it up. right? So, for instance, if you have a very specific question, how do I do X or Y? And you type it in, I skip anything that starts with Oracle, that means it's documentation, right? I don't like strict documentation, but everyone likes Stack Overflow, right? It's a very useful site if you have a specific question. I almost never use the first answer. The first answer is typically written by somebody who wanted to be the first answer, right? Like, what a dumb question, right? And then they give an answer. So I usually scroll down, and I know this frustrates people, but if you go over to computer science or one of the EECS departments, there's actually this joke among CS majors that they're going to rename the CS major. I think I told you this. Rename it as Stack Overflow. Oh, I got a bachelor's in Stack Overflow. You're like, oh wow, you must be good, right? So I like Stack Overflow for a very specific. But in this class, what I've been using more, because they've really stepped up their game, for kind of general reference, I've been finding that I really like the W3 schools. All right, so I'm going to link to that. Somehow I have 2 slides exactly the same. I think I'm going to go to it right now. It's the same one. The other one I really like, and can one of you two help me if you know, it's like a CSS. Oh, I go to it all the time, and it's something CSS. CSS Tricks, thank you. Yes, CSS Tricks. And the reason I like CSS Tricks is because they link to CodePen. W3 Schools has their link to Try Me, and CSS Tricks links to CodePen. I think any reference where you don't get to type it in is not a great reference for learning. It's a great reference when you already know the stuff. When you're learning, you need that ability to type it in. Okay? So I'm going to put this up here, and we're going to leave this open in the corner, because it's a reference I've found for you. You might want to link to it yourself later, but it's just W3 Schools /jQuery, and then right down here I did the HTML and CSS mappings. Okay. I think I'm on the next slide already. Let me double check. Okay, so I have the getting started. All right, so the very first thing, oops, I kind of told you the answer. Ignore that, you did not see that. Okay, so we're going to go back to our code over here. And the very first thing that I wanted you to do is change the H1 element to your name. All right, so I'm going to put in a little comma here. And to make life even easier, hopefully, I'm going to go over here to our old answers from last week. Ah, shoot, except for I changed it. Nope, all right. Here we go. I've got it back. This was our original, I'm going to put it outside so it's easier to read. This was our original code for, hey, I want to change the H1 element to Colleen Van Lijn. All right, so let's put our jQuery hats on. It was a week ago. It's been a tough week. Let me do. When we're using jQuery, how do we reference a selector? In this case, our selector is H1. How do we reference a selector in jQuery? Anyone remember? Very short. It's just a $sign. I can get rid of all of this, and I can put in a $sign. Yes?
Just to quickly know how much of this and how diligently we have to copy down, will we get the answers posted afterwards?
No, but we're going to code it. That's why we're going to do it all together right now. There's only 6 steps, so absolutely, yeah. If you want to do it and you want to raise your hand if at any point you get stuck. Thank you, that's a great question. My goal today is to have everyone have their own working copy. I am recording the lecture, so if anyone wants to go back and look at that, but nope, I want total hands on. So I'll put it on both for right now as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm on laptop now, is I'm going to open this up in my browser. I'm going to close everything else. And it didn't work. So I am going to do my inspect. And make it a lot bigger for everybody. Made it too big, sorry. I can't control it. Did you all get an error? says the dollar sign is not defined. And I intentionally want to do this because you will see this error again and again and again. Does anyone know what it means when the console gives you the error dollar sign is not defined? Oh, yes.
The jQuery library hasn't been imported or the reference of it.
So the answer we got was the jQuery library hasn't been imported. It doesn't know what the dollar sign is yet because you didn't tell it yet to use jQuery. Okay? So again, we're doing this as if this is something you're doing on your own. All right? There's two ways to get or use the jQuery library. One is to actually download the files, and then you can have a link like you always do. You put it, you have link, source equals, blah, blah. Does anyone remember another way to link to libraries, such as like Font Awesome or Bootstrap? The CDN, yes, excellent. All right, so as a coder, I'm actually type this in. I'm going to put in jQuery CDN, and here is my good friend W3 Schools. Even better, it ends in get started. So here was option 1. If you have all the jQuery code, go ahead and link to it. Here's option 2. And it's a script that links. So I'm going to copy that real quick. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste it right up here. Now, a couple quick notes. In 339, some people were like, no, I'm just going to type whatever Colleen put up here. I'm not going to copy and paste it. I don't want to open up another tab. For whatever reason, that's fine. How many of those people do you think ended up having a typo somewhere in there so it didn't work, and then in the end they had to go? For things like this, it's always smarter to copy and paste. Okay? So that was 1. 2, you might notice we now have 2 script tags. All right? If you're going to have script, and inside that script you're going to have source equals blah, 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 keep that separate. Don't try to combine the two. Have one and then the other. In the example that had it in the head, it's fine that I'm putting it down at the bottom. Okay. Yes?
What is the reason for having separate script tags?
Right, so it doesn't know how to really work it if you have like when you have script source equals, it's now going and getting that script. And it doesn't really know how to concatenate that plus what's in there. It's kind of like, even if you think about it, we link to multiple style sheets too, right? And when we do that, we have link, 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 link. We don't try to put them together. So, oh yes?
Sorry, I don't follow. What is the link?
The see how it says script source equals HTTPS Ajax? That link right there? Yeah, so that's a great question. That's saying, hey, I want to use Ajax, I want to use jQuery, and so please go to this URL and download the most recent version of jQuery, of 3.4.1 jQuery. It's letting you use the jQuery library without actually storing it on your computer. Yeah.
Why does W3 Schools have that within the header tags and not the body like we do?
Right, so you can put it in JavaScript. Most scripts can go anywhere you want, either in the header or the body. And if we were doing this someplace else, I would put it in the header. But since I'm trying to keep all the code, the jQuery code I'm writing for you, close together and not going back and forth, I'm putting it there. Okay? Now, I'm going to have a follow-up answer to that as well in just a second. So can you try it now and see? It still isn't going to work, but did it get rid of the console.log error? Okay, and if you two can keep an eye out for now. So is anybody still getting the error? I'm going to send the GSI off to help you out with this. Okay. All right, but it didn't work. All right? That is because inner HTML is a JavaScript concept. So either click on the link yourself, or I'm going to pop this over here. Remember how I said I have this nice reference? Takes so long to go back and forth. I'm going to make it even bigger. Kind of curious what happens. There we go, at some point. So we have all these different methods that we can use. All right, does anyone see, I don't know if anyone else has it open, but hey, here's a method called HTML. All right, I've got a slide about that. All right, the HTML method works in multiple ways. All right, HTML method as one, all by itself. If you just have selector.html, it will return the content. It'll return that HTML. So in your code right now, let's do this. Right before this h1, inner HTML, blah, 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 let's put alert So what I did is I said, hey, let's print out, grab the HTML, grab the H1 and just print out the HTML. I'm going to run this to make sure I don't have an error before you keep typing it. Okay, yes. So I'm saying, hey, I would like to see what this .html method does. And in this case, when you have it all by itself, selector.html, it'll find that selector and it'll return whatever was in it. So in this case, what's our original value of H1? Can someone read it off for me? Your name here or something like that? Okay. That's exactly what my alert says, your name here. But you can also use that same method to set content. So in this case, it returns content. In this case, it sets content. So right here, you have .inner HTML, right? That doesn't exist. What's the method we need to use instead? Yep. So type this in and then compare it to the slide. I'm going to put that a little higher so people can see it a little better. And I'm always torn between putting it on both. I will. And you can get rid of the alert now too, it's just annoying. And this is, so if we do this, we're saying grab this element and now set the HTML to whatever I have in here. So we should now be, and this is where we're going to start helping people out more, where your name is at the top. Right? The next challenge was to update the URL of this page is, blah, blah, blah. The number of list items this page is, and the current date time is. So in all three cases, we're doing the same idea. We're grabbing an element using the $sign. And then we're going to use the HTML method to set it. So I'm going to set my watch for 5 minutes. I'm going to uncomment this so you can see what it is. And I now expect you to have something like, oh, and I'll add some text so you can see. I will show you what the answer used to be. Using this as a guideline, can you change your code so that you use jQuery for these 3 steps? If you did not get your name to show up yet, raise your hand because you can't really get any further until your name is up. Everyone else, I've got my timer running for 5 minutes to work on this a little bit. Talk amongst yourselves, too, as you do. All right. See how this one. Yeah, thank you. Can I help anyone else get their name up there? So quick note, I don't want you hard coding anything on the right hand side. So that document.url, if you move it to a new folder, it should still work. If you move it to your desktop, it should still work. All right, so if you're working on the document URL, I was just going to doodle along with you here. Whenever you're using jQuery, you can immediately get rid of all of the document.query selector and just replace it with a $sign. Okay, so that was step one. Step two is I know that inner HTML doesn't work anymore. So I replaced it with the HTML method. I can still use this. All right, so if I check it now, the URL of this page is blah, 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 blah. This is, oh, I'm on a really old document from fall 2016. Okay. Now these parts are still working, but that's not fair because I'm still using JavaScript. All right. So I'm going to pause 1 minute, and if you didn't get the URL to work, make sure you give a little hand wave. That was just a face scratch, right? All right, so let's do the next one. Same idea. What can we do with the document.query selector items? We can simply use this. I can change this to HTML. I'm not done yet, but I know I want to change that. So here's the question. What do we do with this document.query selector all thing?
You can put the $sign and then like get rid of the document dot selector all $sign and then keep it how it is.
Yep. Thing is, with JavaScript, you gotta remember, is it query selector all, etc. jQuery, it's just like, nope, I'm just gonna replace, once again, the document.query, blah, blah, blah. I can replace it with the $sign. Once I do that, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to paste it. Now, personally, I found the JavaScript answer easier to read, right? Like, because I find the jQuery use that you can use methods as both, I call them setters and getters. It can be a little confusing at times. And so this whole idea, left-hand side, right-hand side, it makes more sense to me, which is why I tend to go from JavaScript to jQuery at first. But for some people, they pick it up instantly, and that's great. Okay. What about the last one? Did anyone get the last one to work yet? Okay. I'm going to wait 1 minute, and I want everyone to give that last one an attempt. It's not, there's nothing tricky about this one, but I will tell you this, there is no jQuery function for date. We reuse the JavaScript. Okay. And if there's anyone who hasn't gotten these first two to work yet, let us know. Make sure you're testing too. Can you use it? I'm going to check before I show you. Okay. So jQuery, it's just going to be like with any other programming language you've been learning. Lots of try a little something, keep going. Try a little something, keep going. Unfortunately, it's very case sensitive. All right. If anyone used document.url lowercase, it didn't work. All right. Someone else the other day, it's even just a JavaScript thing. They were doing something and they didn't use camel case, and it broke and it took us a long time to figure out because the console didn't show us. Right. So that is how you change the inner HTML of things. So if you, I'll show it to you all because we have the time. Let me go here for a second. Not sure which one's going to pop up. So that one, the one we just did, no, even that one's not really that great. All right. But how do we do something like this? With this, we weren't changing the inner HTML. What were we changing? We were toggling things to make them hide and show. Okay? So the nice thing about jQuery is it actually has functions to do that for you. But I guess my question is also, in the first one we were trying to change the HTML. Here we were trying to change the style. Okay? So what if you want to do something that doesn't have a toggle? Right? There is no toggle for background color. Right? Or toggle, I mean there is, it goes back and forth to the default. It's not really like set. How do we set a color? How do we set a margin? Okay? So actually I'm going to do this one first because it's kind of challenge 2. Right. In challenge 2, we weren't changing the HTML. We weren't using the .html at all. Does anyone remember which attributes we were using when you want to get what's inside text boxes and text areas. Being very careful not to use a certain word here. There was an attribute, yeah. It was value. The attribute is value. So changing inner HTML changes like stuff inside the tag. Value is how you change. We were saying things like we were getting billing address and we were using it to set home address. So it was like home address dot value equals billing dot value, right? There is no dot value in jQuery, right? You cannot use that. What you can use instead, wrong one, so I'll just do it on both. It's the same idea as the HTML method. There's a val method. So if we use selector.val, it's going to return the value. If we do selector.val and give it something, it sets the value. Right? So in homework, in the next homework, when you go to change challenge 2, this is the method you're going to want to use. All right? It's going to be the same kind of logic as that. At no point, I have this down here, but at no point do you read it in these homeworks. If you ever wanted to, you could actually set multiple attributes in multiple lines. Okay? But let's look at this one instead, because this goes along with the challenge we're doing right now in class. There's a .html to change the text. There's also a .css. You can find out, hey, what's the value of the background color? What's the value of the margin? With HTML, we got to just say .html, because it's like, oh, here's the selector, here's the text you want. You don't want to say selector.css. Is it, well, what property is it you want to know? Is it the background color, the margin, the padding? So this is a getter. This returns the value. And this one is how you set it. Hey, background color, green. Margin, 15 pixels. Right? So rather than everyone link and do this on your own, let's do this together for just a second. Does it actually show up on here? Great. Oh, actually, I'm going to make this smaller. Okay. I guess I'll make it bigger. I wanted to make it smaller, you could see it, but I wanted to point out undergrads found it incredibly distracting to have advertisements going the whole time, right? Which is exactly what we were talking about with accessibility. None of you probably necessarily think of yourselves as very distractible, but when you're trying to learn something and things are flipping. Okay, so the syntax here. Quotes are very important, okay? Keep remembering, quotes are very important. So here, we want to have a pink background to the P element. This would be all P elements. So I would say, I'm trying to change a CSS in here. So I'm going to do this. It's wrong. And if I try that, it doesn't work. Because it's specifically looking for background color. All right? It doesn't, because background can actually be made up of lots of attributes, the repeat, the not repeat. It needs background color. So let me hit submit answer here for a second. Yay! But I don't actually want to go to next. Someone asked a great question last week, which was or 2 weeks ago, when we were doing JavaScript, you were not allowed to use style.background color with the minus. What's the other word for that? I'm trying to think of it all day. Is it dash? Hyphen? Okay. Background hyphen color. It was like, why can we not? You couldn't use that in JavaScript. And the reason was, since it wasn't in quotes, it would consider it two variables. Background minus color, as opposed to background hyphen color. I'll remember that. I'll retain that for 30 seconds. All right? So you do need to be specific. All right? When you're doing your jQuery, you need to have things open. You need to make small changes. Because unfortunately, if you do background instead of background color, it doesn't give you a nice error message telling you what you were trying to do. All right? So that one was make it pink. This is how do you add a 5 pixels red dotted border? So again, you say CSS, border, 5 pixels. Okay. It didn't like it because I didn't go in the same order. Sorry, it's 5 pixels dotted red. Did I forget anything? There we go. All right, this one is the one where okay, here, instead of setting something, what are we trying to do? Trying to get it. Whenever I see return, so in this case, I can just do CSS. Oh, there, I got it. All right, and you kind of get the idea. You can add as many or as few as you want to at a time. Okay? So it's the syntax is element.css, and then in parentheses you have the property in quotes, comma, the new value in quotes. All right, so let's go back to what you're working on. Oops, wrong thing. All right, so now what you want to do is you want to change the background color and the margin for the entire page. I didn't give you anything specific. So based on what we just saw, how can you change the background color and the margin for the entire page right in here? Who wants to offer up what the selector will be, by the way, just to get people started? Body, yep, you can use the body. One second, I'm going to practice something for a second, and then I'll come back. Oops. All right. How did that go for everybody? I didn't do that part. That's okay. We can live without it right here. Okay. Does anyone remember the last thing we did for this in-class exercise? Or is that your discussion exercise? What was the last thing we did with this? Go blue, right? Go blue. Every time we did a copy on University of Michigan, we had to say go blue. Right? So just to tiptoe, get our toes wet for what's coming next week, I'd like to do something slightly different this week on this one. Okay? So look at the code I gave you. Go in and look at those list items. The Michigan, University of Ulster, Kent State. What is in there that maybe some of you have never seen before? Did you see anything in there? The data cheer. Yeah, someone's seen it before. They said the data attribute. All right. So data attributes are kind of a way for us to use variables. All right. Think of all the coding we've done, and we know how to get things by ID, and by name, and by class. And what happens is we get like attributes back about that DOM element. So, I know how to get this one thing, or I know how to get all of these list items. And I can find out any attribute I need to know. The inner HTML, the CSS, anything that's very HTML oriented. What I can't do is very easily have special information that isn't DOM related in there. There's only been one time we've ever really had name value pairs, where we've associated something in our tree with a specific value. And that was in our forms. Remember when you do the form processing, when you hit submit, what would happen is it would look somewhere, you would have something like name equals age. Right? And then when someone typed in 27, you got age equals 27. There's this way to have kind of a name value pair, some information. Okay? Data attributes says, well, the only thing that has a name are form elements. Other elements don't have names. There's no name attribute on any of them. So let's make something called data attributes that lets us store tiny pieces of information. Data attributes always start with the word data. All right? Then you get to pick what you want the rest of the variable name to be. So in this case, I picked cheer. I had data cheer, right? Is that what data cheer. Okay. And under Kent, I have flashes because I went to Kent State where there's golden flashes. My favorite was Cal State Long Beach. We go, y'all go beach. I should include my niece because she goes to Austin P, and their cheers actually go P, which we think is funny because we're full of 10-year-olds in our house. Right? So I've added these data attributes in here. So each one of these have a special attribute called cheer. Okay? This part is brand new. I'm going to show you this code in a second. We're not coming up with it on our own. I'm showing it to you. All right? What I want to do now is instead of when I copy one of those to always say go blue, I want to say, hey, let's say go Ulsterman, or go blue, go flashes. Okay? But before we start thinking about that, I need to ask you, we are listening for an event on each one of these. All right? What is the selector that I need to use to say I want to listen to these and only these? You probably want to look at the code for a second. So I want to put a listener on these list items, but not those list items up there. How do we identify just these list items? There's no ID, and there's no class.
Data cheer. Or a cheer.
Well, we don't even want to use the data cheer right here, because you all don't know that yet. But think about CSS. Let's think about the CSS for a second. If you were going to style, let's not think jQuery, let's just think CSS. if we want to style these list items, how are these list items different than those list items up above? Yeah, so the top ones are ordered lists, and these are unordered lists. So if I want to just listen to these ones, it would be UL, LI. So now with jQuery, what would we do? $sign. All right. Does anyone here use jQuery a lot? Because I know things change. And so I'm going to tell you something, and I can't believe it hasn't changed yet. But as far as I can tell, jQuery still doesn't have like an on copy. JavaScript had like an on copy, like a listener you could listen to. jQuery does not. All right. There are certain events you have to do something called binding. So let me show you the code, and you can type it in here for a second. What I would like you all to add is right there in that code, and, well, to be honest, along with I'd like to see you add that code and then test it. And quick question, how do you test it? You copy it, but then how do you know if it copied? We need to look at the console, right? Make sure you've got that console open. So we are ready and waiting. I'll admit, my keyboard was a little funky, so every once in a while I did a copy, it didn't do anything. Like I would do it 2 or 3 times, it worked, it didn't work on it. So if yours isn't working, raise your hand now so we can come help you with it. Make this one bigger. There we go. Yeah. Okay. All right, so we can all react to copying happening. And so what I want to do is I want to append, we have that little div cheer thing right there. I want to append some paragraphs to it. I want to say, go blue, go beach, go etc. Okay? So this is the code I'm just going to kind of show you and we're going to talk about to see if we can break it down. How do I grab cheer? Well, if I want to append it to the cheer element, I use my jQuery to get cheer. Well, if I were to use .html, that would then set the HTML inside of that to whatever it is. Go blue, go beach. That would be fine. In fact, we're going to play with that later. I'm going to have you put in an HTML instead of a 10. But here we're saying, hey, keep adding to the end. Don't keep overwriting. I've got my little paragraph tag, got my plus, and I've got my end paragraph tag. The code I am pointing to, and trying not to say the word this code, the code I am pointing to has the word this in it. What does the word this reference? In this particular example, what element does the word this reference or represent? It's the ULLI. It's saying, hey, find the thing that's being copied right now. I don't know if that's line 2, I don't know if that's the first list item, the second list item, the thing being copied right now. Please find its data attribute named cheer. What value does it have? And copy that in. So just type this in and see if it works, and then we'll go back and we'll dissect it. Right, done. I'll leave that there for a second. I'm going to test it. If you get this working, my challenge for you, while we help other people get it working, is to add a final school. A school you hate. A school you just loathe. And I want if someone copies that school, I want you to say, go home. All right? So once you get this to work, change the HTML to add another list item. But until then, if you can't get this to work, raise your hand and we'll come get you. So this data thing is new to people who've even been doing some coding before. So I just want to show you something. We were going to do this next week. This is why I kind of introduced it. Data attributes are nice if you want to, like I said, have extra information about things that aren't part of the DOM. So we're going to use something called Mix It Up next week. Accessibility-wise, it's horrible. My apologies for people who are colorblind at the moment because, in case you can't, the first two are green, 1 and 2 are green, 3 and 4 are blue, 5 and 6 are pink. They also have numbers on them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So think about your page that has a bunch of images in it. All right? So let's say you did travel, whatever, and you've got some from the US and some from Europe. Okay? You can add a data, you can basically start adding data attributes. You say, hey, these ones are from these countries and these ones from others. And we can start filtering it. Or in this case, I'm going to right-click one of these. I'm going to right-click the second one. I'm going to inspect it so we can see the code. And I know it's really small for you. See if I can make it bigger. Best I can do. And if you look, you can see, not very well. It has a data attribute called data order, and they gave it a 2. All right. This one has data order. They gave it a 1, 2, 3, 4. So now, by doing that, you can actually use some JavaScript and jQuery to say, hey, put these in order, or reverse order, randomize it. You can use these numbers to do things to your content. You can use data attributes to say, hey, only show the pink ones. Only show the blue or the green ones. So you can do a lot of filtering and things like that. And it looks really intimidating. And you would never, at this level of the class, I would never expect you to write the JavaScript and the jQuery that's going to sort things and order things. Because we already have products out there that can do that for you. But in order to use things like Mix It Up, you need to be able to go into your code and say, data order equals 1, and not be so, not be overly anxious. Like, okay, the documentation says to add a data attribute called blah, and give it the value blah, blah, blah. Right? That's the level I'm looking for. So this Mix It Up next week that we're going to do, the weather API, you're going to have to know to do your homework. Once I do the weather API, everything else I talk about in lecture from then on out is a, hey, for people who are interested, let me show you something. Okay? So what I'm hoping you'll take away from this week from what we just did here is, let's go back to the challenges. As I mentioned, and you have 2 weeks from today to do this. Things have slowed down. Hey, sorry, wrong page. I'm going to put this over here. I'm going to put this over here. Yeah. Kind of use this page as a reference. We have most of it. On this one, it's going to say, hey, can you use jQuery to toggle this? If you want to check last week's lecture, which is posted, you don't need to animate it like I did or anything like that. Just open or close it. On this one, this is the slide I was talking about, where instead of using .value, we want to use .val. Right? And you're going to copy you're going to listen for this and copy back and forth. Challenge 3 looks different, so ignore that one. Oh, yeah, okay, pick a value. Remember this one? Yeah, I just had to check to make sure that the value wasn't empty. Stupid assignments, all right? And then the last one, again, you're just gonna have, remember how before we just did like image dot source equals? Well now, because we're talking about properties, we do like property source, etc. All right, you can no longer directly access the style, you have to go via the CSS. You can't directly access the source, you have to go through the properties. We got 2 weeks, happy to answer questions next week on it, and the week after in class. Well, this is really meant to be a take your time, work through it, ask lots of questions. All right. My goal is that you can work through this. The earlier homework assignments, we were looking for some level of mastery / competency. You could do this on your own again. You can recreate your portfolio. All right. Here, you're getting it through to where we expect you to get to where you can ask the right questions. So if you were working with someone else, you can get through it. Question.
How do you want us to submit this?
This will be just like the other one. You'll submit the link to challenge 1, and then we'll click on it to challenge 2, challenge 3.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, it'll go all the way across. Yep. All right. Questions on that? So, just as a reminder, hopefully you got the email from today. The second half of today, I want to leave for you to talk with your groups a little bit. This week is group week. You should be writing down everything you do as a group, right? Because we're like, hey, at the end of the semester, we're going to say, how much time did you spend on this? What did you spend your time doing? And you're going to be able to give us a nice little thing. It says, we spent half an hour deciding on this. We spent 45 minutes doing this. Individually, I spent 2 hours doing that. So you can spend the remainder of this class time. Discussion this week is working with your groups. If for some reason you can't make it to discussion for group work, the only way to get points for being there is to like video chat in. But again, these count as one of the normal 2 drops. The only discussion that you cannot drop is the final one when people are giving their presentations and discussion. So if you haven't missed a discussion yet, I think you might almost be clear for the rest of the semester. I can't quite remember. All right. But again, if you can't meet with your group during discussion, please just make sure you, and you want the credit, Google chat in, say hi, and then you can put your pajama top back on, match your pants, and be good. Okay? You can call in a pajama. Questions on these? Okay. As promised, we're tapering down. I still want you to learn stuff. I still want it to be valuable to come to class. I'm hoping for the anxiety you can taper down. Okay? So either meet with your group, leave, or if you have questions, if you're starting to look over the next homework, we're happy to answer those too. We're not leaving. In fact, who's in class with me after this? Anyone? I'm covering Robin's class. Just yeah. I'm not going the whole 3 hours. All right. Okay, yeah. Yes. Hold on, I'm going to turn off the timer. I'm going to turn off the screen capture.